Well, good evening, everybody. An absolute pleasure to welcome you to this year's OnFife celebration of International Women's Day 2021. You are very welcome. Great to see you here. Like everything else recently, we've got a different approach tonight. We are online, but still together celebrating this really important event. My name is Heather Stewart. I'm Chief Executive of OnFife, and it's my pleasure to be kicking off the proceedings this evening. So great to see so many of you joining us tonight. And I hope you've also had a chance to enjoy the day-long programme that we've been running, or some of the elements of it at least. The range of things I thought today was amazing, from poetry to mindfulness to line dancing to readings of Virginia Woolf, and now this fantastic panel session to round off the day. We've got some really great speakers lined up for you this evening. I know we've got a great event ahead of us. So the theme for this year for International Women's Day, as you probably know, is Choose to Challenge. A challenged world is an alert world, and we are all responsible for our thoughts and actions all day, every day. So let's choose to challenge and call out gender bias and inequality wherever we see it, and to do it together. Today we're inviting you to contemplate women in Fife in a new and different way, and it's great to have you here to explore that opportunity with you. I'd like to introduce you now to your host for this evening, Lisa May Young, who'll be here with you in just a couple of minutes. So apart from being an all-round amazing human being, I'm getting a little envelope with some cash in that from Lisa later. Lisa, as you will probably know, at least some of you, is a well-known radio presenter, podcaster, author, and also a host of popular podcasts, including Holding the Space. She's passionate about helping others express their creativity, and I think she's therefore the ideal host for our event this evening. Before I hand you over to Lisa, can I ask you to really get involved in the evening as much as you would like? It's a webinar, so the chat's there for you to use throughout the evening. So chatter away with us, the panelists, with each other, share the experience as much as you would like to. And you can also pose some questions in the chat, or put some questions in through the Q&A, and we'll then pick those up with our amazing panelists later on. So now I'm going to hand you over into the very capable hands of Lisa May Young, your host for this evening. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Women in Fife event for 2021. I'm so glad that you're here with us this evening. We're marking OnFife's International Women's Day 2021. I'm your host, Lisa May Young, and I'll be looking after you and our speakers and our guests this evening. Welcome to our audience. This is your event. The chat box is for you. Please tell us what your name is, where you're from. If you have any comments or questions, we'd absolutely love to hear from you. Now, we've all done Zoom over the last year, and we've all had our experience with technology gremlins. So you may hear dogs, you may hear kids in the background. My tripod with my light on it might go flying off the desk, but don't worry about it. We're going to be here for the next hour. OnFife marks International Women's Day. What we're talking about is the impact of what has been, for example, the life and work of Jenny Lee, which is going to be celebrated at a panel discussion this coming Monday. And we're talking about the now, which is the conversations and discussions we're going to have with the amazing creatives we have this evening. As Heather says, the campaign theme for International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge. It's about calling out gender bias and inequality. It's about looking at a social media post and celebrating women's achievements. And it's about opening a door for another woman and cheering her on as she walks through it. I believe our event tonight, Women in Fife, is very aptly titled. One trait of Fifers and women in Fife is that we're very adept at challenging and championing. Whether it's a conversation, in past days I've had wonderful conversations in Kirkcaldy Galleries, a suggestion from a creative colleague on the OnFife Creative Conversations, or a comment in the Facebook group creating Fife Facebook group. When someone in Fife asks for help, we'll offer it, both creative and otherwise. We've got a great community. Tonight we'll hear from 4 extraordinary, inspiring creative women in Fife. Emma Lynn Harley, Rachel Nixon, Elie Ellery, and Rachel Louise Lee. They're going to be sharing their work, their story, and how their creative practice has been impacted by COVID. Without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Rachel Louise Lee, and invite them on camera with us.
Hello.
Hello, Rachel.
Hi.
Hello, Rachel. Welcome.
Thank you.
Rachel Louise Lee graduated in 2015 from DGCAD with a BA Honours First Class in Fine Art. She received the Bernard Cooper Memorial Award for Best Portfolio Work in the Year. Rachel has since featured in several exhibitions and publications and currently works alongside interior designers to bring arts into homes, and her artwork is absolutely glorious. I give you Rachel.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to do a thank you, everybody. If you like to ask me any questions or chat to me, please feel free to pop it in the chat. I'm going to try and share my screen, although it's not letting me just now. So hopefully that'll be fixed soon and we can chat through some of my artwork and my processes. I'd love to share with you all. So here it is now. Share screen. Like everything, we're having to get used to all these ways of new things. It's a wee bit. Let me just have a wee look. So as you can see here, I'm Rachel Louise Lee. Thank you to Lisa for introducing me. Thanks to you all for joining. I graduated from Duncan of Jordanstone in 2015 with a first class honours degree in fine art, as Lisa mentioned, and I specialise in printmaking with a particular interest in art and mental health. So I'll talk you through some of my work. So after graduating, I hosted my first solo exhibition in Fife and went on to work as a screen printer. I've always had an interest in art and mental health, and this developed after my studies as I started working in the community. So currently I work in the as a community engagement officer with people in the local community who are suffering from mental health, but also work alongside an interiors business to share my art. So here's a picture of me screen printing at university with a massive smile on my face because it's what I love to do. And if anybody doesn't know what screen printing is, it's where you use a mesh screen to push ink through onto anything really, paper, plastic, t-shirts. You can do it on almost anything. And it gives a really nice graphic and bold effect to it. I'm lucky enough that my work is featured in various magazines and Instagram posts and books to do with interiors. I work alongside an interiors website to do this, and I'm very grateful to have all these publications to bring affordable art into people's homes. It's something that I feel quite passionate about, and I think it's something that everyone should be able to have. So moving on, what influences my work? Mainly the Surrealist artists. Surrealism, most people will have heard of Salvador Dali, who's a Surrealist artist, but particularly female artists who are not typically categorised as Surrealists definitely influenced my work. There's a fantastic photographer called Francesca Woodman, who isn't normally classed as a Surrealist artist, but her works are so ghostly and quite ethereal that she definitely touches upon Surrealism, and it's so interesting. And Surrealists use the technique of automatic drawing, where you convey your thoughts and the subconscious mind really without even trying. Automatic drawing and automatic writing is really just to channel your subconscious out onto paper without really thinking about it. It's a technique used by many Surrealists, and it's a fantastic thing to practice for relaxation, but also just to tune in with your thoughts in your subconscious mind if you're having a bit of a creative sticky time. It's a really fantastic thing to do. And you can see here that this piece of work that I done was in my sketchbook, which is only about A5 size. So I've done it quite fast. It only took a couple of seconds to really do, but I blew that up and screen printed it onto a larger piece, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. And these automatic drawings and writings that are in my work contribute to building a landscape, which you can't achieve in a sort of set process, if you know what I mean. It's more about channeling your subconscious and just going with it and letting the work develop itself. And what happens is landscapes are built that are just pure depictions of thoughts and dreams and just your emotions, really. So I always like to say that every piece that I make is a almost like a little diary entry for me. They're so personal. I write a lot in my work, but the text often isn't readable, but that's okay because it's that exact thought I had at that time and I can't remember that. So when people ask me, what does it say in your work? Often I don't know. And it's interesting to watch people try and kind of solve it and work it out, but it's really there just as an in the moment thing to be appreciated then and not to be worked out. And this piece conveniently is called Automatism, which is a sort of tribute to surrealists. So as I mentioned, a lot of my work is built around layers and layers in sketchbooks, layers on different pieces that I do. You can see here that this is a piece from one of my sketchbooks where I've layered different acetates, which you use in screen printing. And this is really just me working out where I can go with a piece. I actually very rarely plan a piece. It always seems to develop itself through this automatic way of working that the surrealists used. And you can see here, this is a sort of final layered piece. This is a finished piece of work that I've done in my landscape series, where there are lots of layers and different textures, and there's digital art, there's lithography, there's collage, there's screen print. There's a wee bit of everything just to really create an in-depth piece of work. And you can see here again in one of my sketchbooks where I am just practicing with layers, but none of my work turns out how I really would plan it to be. So I just go with it and see what comes as I'm making it. And it is really a reflection of how I feel on every day that I make work. So over the weeks that I do make a piece of work, there can be so many different emotions in it, so many different feelings in it. I'll have different days where I feel great, or I have days where I just don't feel creative at all. And it's nice to capture that all in one big piece. And as I mentioned, I do have a particular interest in art and mental health. It's always been a fascination of mine how I think without even realising it, artists convey their emotions through their work, which it wouldn't, it would be hard not to, because if you're making something quite visual or expressive, then it's going to have a little bit of you in it. And it's important to me to use my surrounding landscapes, which is very convenient given this time. But if I'm depicting all my thoughts and emotions in this work, then I have to put places in that mean something to me. So there's a lot of fields and objects and different sites that appear in my work that are very local to me. So you can see on the bottom of this piece that it's a local field near where I grew up. And I think that adds to the sort of building of it being such a personal piece and really depicting how I'm feeling. And it's just like a little, like I said at the start, a little diary entry. And these two pieces that you see here, these are part of a wider steel series. They are framed in steel. As you can see here, I exhibited these in the Rothes halls. And there was originally 5 of them that I exhibited. And they're quite big pieces, they're quite striking. And they were made at totally different times. None of them were planned right down to what they would be. They all grew different arms and legs really as I made them. So they are totally different depictions of my emotions and how I was feeling. And because my work is so multi-layered, you end up getting little mini pieces of work within the larger piece. You end up looking at little corners and noticing different things, or you notice different shapes, or you see a different bit of landscape every time you look at it. And I think it's so interesting because these layers create that, and through using different materials and processes, but using different figures and landscapes and shapes, all these little mini works grow to become a larger piece. And I think that's really important for me, because I talk a lot about art and mental health and psychology, and that is sort of resembles how your brain works sometimes. It's so multi-layered, and mental health is never stagnant. And I think that's a good thing for me to remember when I'm making work, and a key message that seems to trickle through all my work. And the female body particularly is featured a lot in my work, and that's why I was really keen to get involved in International Women's Day, actually. And that's because I use myself as my own model for most of my work. Just going back to the personal side of things, when I'm making a piece, it's got all my thoughts and emotions and places that I've seen, and everything that I've been doing, and objects and whatnot. So I wanted to have myself just as a sort of point in it, to be that figure, and to be almost like a focal point to break up all the chaos that's going on, and to have myself in the flesh and amongst these complex landscapes quite interesting. And this piece in particular is called the Phobia Series, which depicts how chaotic a phobia can be. And there's 2 in this series, which you can see here. And it's a bit of a role reversal, I suppose, when your thoughts are sort of outside in, so that your thoughts are depicted on the paper, then the body takes a step backward, and the body's not meant to be as appreciated, and the thoughts are creating all these landscapes and whatnot. And it just goes to show how valuable your mind is in driving us forward, and that your outer bodies, in a way, don't really matter. And that is something I really tried to include when I was creating this piece for International Women's Day. And this picture is a picture of the process when I was halfway through it. And I felt like these pieces were feeling quite stuck. And the thing I wanted to convey the most was how the figures are visibly emerging from their environment. They're breaking free from this trapped feeling in their thoughts or their emotions. And it's really important, because women through various cultures and timelines have had to adapt to society that they're born into. And many are often required to fit and blend in with the background and be a vessel, nothing but a vessel for reproduction or housework or whatever. But many are now emerging. And maybe if we can continue to appreciate and see past the vessel and see what's in the mind, and appreciate their mental well-being and really what goes on inside rather than this outer shell, then that's maybe when we can hopefully achieve equality for everybody. And that's something I really wanted to depict in this piece. So thank you so much. Sorry that there was a little bit typical Zoom thing happened at the start there, but thank you so much for listening to me. This is where you can find me. Please pop any questions in the chat, and I have an upcoming exhibition with Impact 11. If anyone is really into printmaking, they can check that out. I think it's in April. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to me waffle on there. I'll hand back over to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Rachel. That work was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Sorry, my presentation didn't work too well, but things like that always happen on Zoom. So
welcome to Zoom. So
yeah, I know.
don't worry about it. So I'm looking forward to catching up with you when we have our wee natter at the end. So thank you so much, Rachel.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lisa.
It is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Elie Ellery, and I'd like to ask her to appear on camera if she's ready. Hello, Elie. Elie is a queer Scottish, disabled, interdisciplinary artist, experimental historian, storyteller, musical comedian and problem solver. And from Monday the 8th of March, Elie is the OnFife artist in residence and will be delivering a 4-week workshop series to introduce dance in a safe and tailored way for disabled bodies. Elie's work is truly blow your mind stuff. I give you Elie.
Hi, thank you, Lisa. So I was a little bit hesitant to agree to speak tonight because I am non-binary, but I do have a female body and I am affected by women's issues. So I got over that and came to talk to you tonight. I often describe myself as a recovering ex-textile designer because I graduated from Duncan of Jordanston, much like Rachel did, but in 2012. For a graduate designer, I was, fairly successful. I had fairly big commissions, including work I did for a national research project on identity management called Imprints, where the work was exhibited at Parliament. And I kind of now look back on that time with a little bit of irony, because as a disabled person, many of the MPs who own pieces that I created also believe that I am worth less than minimum wage. So what I mainly discovered from my first attempt at a career in the creative industries was how many access barriers there were, and that I'm not actually a textile designer. But I really want to change the way the industry sees disabled bodies and often excludes us from different opportunities. So in 2014, I was forced to take a little career break. I needed some time to really think about, if I'm not a textile designer, then as a creative, who am I? What am I? What do I do? I got the opportunity in pretty early 2015 to perform as my burlesque alter ego, Less Than Able Seaman Billy Blouse. And what I realised was performing is where I feel alive. So I returned to my background in youth, community and student theatre, which I've been doing on and off since I was 4. And I went back to Fife College for a year part-time to do acting and theatre performance. Quickly figured out I don't really like the studying Shakespeare part, but I really love the rolling about on the floor to music bit. So I embarked on a quest to retrain as an adaptive dancer and circus artist in community arts in Fife. Only there were more access barriers there. And I was rejected by something like 20 different dance schools in Fife and Tayside before one person was willing to allow me into their class and adapt what they were doing to my physicality and my mobility issues. And I'm not okay with that. So in massive nerd fashion, I decided to do some research and try and figure out why nobody seemed to know how to teach disabled bodies how to dance. And that led me to accidentally co-founding a burlesque school in a fishing village in 2019. And then apply for OnFife artist residency, where, as Lisa said, I'm going to be creating and presenting a series of workshops throughout March that will help different people to access dance online. I'm doing face dancing workshops, which kind of builds on a project that I was collaborating with photographer and filmmaker Eric Robinson and composer and musician Elie Ellery on before the pandemic hit. The first phase of which was exhibited at the Scottish Portrait Awards finals in 2019, and the resulting pictures are part of the Scottish Art Club's permanent collection, the Directory of Contemporary Scottish Portraiture. So if you want to see pictures of me screaming at clouds and buy them, you can go over to the SPAs and do that. But when I was deciding what to present tonight, in my usual fashion, I went kind of sideways, and on an entirely unrelated note, I'm gonna sing you a song that I made up about pockets. And I do this thing where I serenade Instagram with whatever random biscuit tin I can get my hands on at the time. And that's what I'm going to do for you just now. So we've got my toffee tin drum. It's covered in birds. All I want are some pockets to keep all my knickknacks in. All I want are some pockets to stop me from losing everything. But why is it different for guys? And why can't they design women's clothing with some gosh darn pockets? All I want are some pockets to keep all my Betso things. All I want are some pockets to stop me from losing everything. And why is it different for guys? And why can't they design women's clothing with some gosh darn pockets? All I want are some pockets. All I want are some pockets. All I want are some pockets to stop me from losing everything. There we go. So I guess hand back over to Lisa, because that's my presentation. Thank you for joining me on an adventure.
That was absolutely glorious, Elie. I loved every single moment of that. I'm so looking forward to catching up with you at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elie. That was amazing. It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Rachel Nixon, and invite them on camera. Rachel's creative story is absolutely amazing. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you.
Hi there, hello.
Hello there. Rachel Nixon is a professional millionaire and business owner of Shanix Millinery. She set up a business in 2019 from home, and I think it was from your bedroom, Rachel, if I'm if I'm not mistaken, and has since become an international award-winning millionaire. Finalist for the Best Wedding Accessory Provider at the Scottish Wedding Awards in 2020, and #1 Scotland Magazine's 2020 Business Innovator of the Year Award recipient. I'm absolutely delighted to leave you with Rachel.
Hi, so I'm going to start my presentation, but do bear with me because I'm not a Zoomer. So my business, Shanix Millinery, I've been making hats for about 5 years now. I initially trained as a nurse, and it was during I lived in Saudi Arabia for a while, and I was invited to this very swanky race event, and all your embassies and ambassadors of the various countries were going, and it really was a very posh event. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go all out there, I'm going to buy a really expensive hat and just try and look fantastic for it. And so I did. I spent a couple of £100 on this beautiful hat in 8 hours, and I put it on, and I just felt amazing. It gave me so much confidence. Like, you know, we all have that piece of clothing that we put on and we just feel so great in it. And that's what that hat did to me. And from that, I took away the best hat and best dressed lady award of the day. So that was quite cool. And when I decided to move back to Scotland, it is the only thing I carried on me by hand, because I wanted to preserve this hat. I wanted to wear it to weddings that I had that year. But a gentleman who was sitting beside me stood up and brushed past me. The hat fell to the ground and he just walked right over it, and that was the end of my hat. I've always been quite creative. I had initially wanted to study fashion, but decided that nursing was probably the safer option. And so I came back from Saudi and I got a job as a children's hospice nurse. And in between that, I thought, right, I'm going to teach myself to make hats, because I can never go spend £200 every time I want to go to a wedding and look swanky and fancy. So I'll just try and make one. And this was one of the first ever hats that I made and actually sold. And, you know, I laugh now because it sold for £15, but actually the materials cost probably double that, and the time it took as well. But, you know, I'd made it for somebody, and they then put it on their social media, and people were saying, you know, where did you get that hat? And from then I got orders. And these are just some of the hats from the beginning. And as I go on, you'll see how well my work has developed. I look back at these now and I think, oh my gosh, people bought these. But actually, do you know what? They're still fantastic. And so as you can see, I got there and I started to offer, you know, for clients to come and visit me in my home studio, in my spare room. They can bring their outfits and I can make them that one-of-a-kind headpiece to match their outfit. And it's something that, you know, you're not going to get in Debenhams, you're not going to get in any of the high street. It really is a unique one-off bespoke piece. So I don't know if you've seen the video that I posted, but I make my hats from scratch and I use hat blocks. I want to try and follow all traditional methods of millinery, because it's an old-fashioned job. You know, it's a trade, and not many people are actually aware of it and what it is. And you can buy pre-made bases and you can buy everything pre-made, but to me, I think, well, you're not really a milliner if you're just buying things that other people have made. So I like to do everything from scratch, and these are, you know, an example of the hat blocks that I would be using. And what you do with these hat blocks is you need to mold your material around it and steam it and stiffen it, and it's quite a, you know, it can be quite a really tough thing if you've got like a hard shape. And I always feel like I'm giving my arms a workout sometimes, but that's just the way example. And then you have to leave it for 24 hours and then you take it off the block. That's a case of wiring. You have to put our hem around the wire and then choose your design. And for this piece that I made, I decided to make some silk flowers. Again, you can buy silk flowers ready-made, but to make my pieces bespoke and to stop copying as well. Copying is quite a big thing in millinery. You know, you've got things like AliExpress, all these Chinese wholesale places who will readily take your work and copy it and mass produce it. And I have had a problem in South Africa where I've had to kind of shut somebody down from stealing my work. But I find if I make my own flowers and make everything by myself, then it makes it difficult for people to reproduce that. And these flowers are just, it's such a long process. It takes me about 1 hour to make each flower, but I'll show you the finished result. As you can see, it's just the perfect match for the dress that I was going to wear it with. And this outfit actually got me in a magazine. It's one of the best dresses of the evening, which is good as well. And you know, any publicity like that is great. So as you can see, I finally got a bit better at making hats. I was self-taught for the first 3 years of my career, and then I studied at Glasgow Clyde, because what I was finding is I wanted to make my business a business instead of a hobby, but I wasn't really getting taken seriously because people would ask me where I study, and I said, well, actually, I'm a nurse, and it just, you know, it wasn't getting taken seriously enough. And I thought, well, maybe if I do have the credentials, I can then, you know, when I am putting forward my business plan again, I say, well, actually, I've studied for this. And it's actually amazing how many doors just having that little piece of paper, even though I can still make hats before, but having that little piece of paper and having that qualification did open so many more doors for me. So I made this hat for a client, and she then wore it to Massively Ladies Day, and she was in the top 10 best dressed ladies. And I don't really do much advertising for my work. I do it all on Facebook. So when you've got a client who's wearing one of your hats and she's in the top 10 ladies, you know, what does she tell her friends? Oh my gosh, I was a best dressed lady. And then, you know, and then that kind of opens up questions of, where did you get your hat? And that again kind of gets the clients into me. And of course, for me, it's great seeing my hats up there and thinking that I made that, you know, somebody's in the top 10 best dress and I'm responsible for that. And, you know, that hat gave her a great night. Look how happy she is. Sometimes I get clients and I do make what my clients want, you know, that's what it's about. It might not be something that I like. And this is a headpiece that I made for a very funky mother of the bride. She wanted it big, fancy, bold, and that's just not me at all. But I made this hat and I remember thinking, I'm not going to put it on my social media pages because people will just look at it and think, oh my gosh, that's just crazy. What a crazy hat. But this hat then ended up on Gumtree, sold still second hand because the mother of the bride had worn it. And this lady must have bought it. She placed the best hat competition at Massively Ladies Day. So then, of course, it was all over my social media pages. I thought, okay, it just goes to kind of show that what might not be my taste is everybody else's taste. So that was quite a good lesson to learn in the creative process, is that, you know, just because it's not something that I might not like, oh, it's that other people like it. I started my business mostly on Facebook, and again, it's, you know, all the reviews you get, that's what kind of drives the business. I mean, I don't do any advertising. I don't really have much business experience, so I wouldn't even know where to start with marketing and things. So I've just stuck with the Facebook for now. But that Facebook and word of mouth, I mean, it's been amazing for me, and it's been amazing for developing my career. When I went to study at Glasgow Clyde, I got given the opportunity to help design a piece for Miss Scotland, who was going to compete in Miss World. So the girls in the fashion department, they made an outfit, and myself and my other milliner, Shona, who was a tutor, we designed and created her matching headpiece. So that was quite an amazing achievement to be asked to help out on that. So I've got here a little process of how I made a little pillbox. This is with roll felt, and roll felt is quite a hard material to work with. You know, you've got to stiffen it first, you've got to steam it, and all these things. You know, you do one thing, then you have to wait for a wee while, and then you go back to it. So you can never just make a hat in a day. Sometimes it can take a day, sometimes it can take up to a week. But I made this piece and beaded the center. I think the beading alone took me about 4 hours. And this is the finished headpiece for that. And again, you know, it's such a simple piece, but I would say that maybe took about 3 to 4 days to make. With studying at Glasgow as well, one of my headpieces was chosen to be exhibited at the Glasgow Trade Centre. That again was great, and actually got me talking to Heather, who's on our chat today. And I remember meeting Heather on a train and saying, you know, my hats are getting exhibited in Glasgow and London. Why not Kirkcaldy? Can we sort something out? And so I'm still waiting on that opportunity because obviously COVID's hit, so hopefully soon. But I won a Fife Visual Artist and Craft Maker Award, and I was then able to go on and buy some hat blocks with that award. And with that, I bought the hat block that I used in college to give me more practice. And I made a hat similar to that one that was on exhibition, but a different size. And this is the hat that came first place in an international competition. And that was absolutely great. I mean, that gave me so much recognition, and the local papers picked it up, and I got so much kind of free marketing from that. And again, you know, I think because I feel in my head I'm a nurse and not a businesswoman, you know, small steps like that kind of help, you know, make me think that actually I am a businesswoman. I'm doing this, you know, I'm being recognised. So again, I've got another lady here. I was looking at ways on how to be sustainable with my business, because a lot of people, so many clients I would get would come and tell me that they've got so many hats in their attic just laying there. And I thought, you know what, that's what we do. You know, we are of that culture where we wear things once, we just chuck it away, especially headpieces. There is a big throwaway culture in headpieces. And I thought, well, I have so many samples in my, well, at the time it was my home studio, but due to COVID, I've had to get premises. But I have so many headpieces, why don't I start a hire collection? And that way people can come, you know, ladies are already spending so much money on their hair, makeup, nails, eyelashes, tan. What's another maybe £30 to hire a fantastic hat that would normally cost a couple £100, and give ladies that feeling of looking fantastic, but not having to pay the £100 for it. And that has been so successful. And this is one of my regular clients who's often bought hats from me. And as soon as I did the hire collection, she was all over that. So she hired out this piece, and she was in the best dress competition. And again, like, you know, I mean, you look at her face and look how happy she is. I mean, she's going to go back and tell her friends, she's going to go on Facebook and say, oh my gosh, best dressed lady, best in the best hat competition. And again, that just gets me so much recognition for my business and for my creativeness. So I then went back to Glasgow to do the advanced millinery course, and I learned how to do a lot more techniques, which I didn't know before. And so that's been a great learning process for me. And from there, afterwards, that kind of gave me the confidence to think, right, you know, I need to look at what I'm doing here, because the hats were becoming a big thing, and I wasn't able to keep up with orders. And then I thought, well, why don't I just, you know, give it a bash and do it full time? Because I was getting nominated for awards, but I couldn't go up for them because I wasn't full time. It was just a hobby. So in July 2019, I decided to leave the Children's Hospice and pursue this as a business. And despite COVID, I would say it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. And so I started getting my hats professionally photographed. And I think just having these photographs as well just kind of made my business feel more official to me and made it feel more proper. I just got a few pictures here you can flick through. I mean, these photos look so much nicer than just a hat on a mannequin. And as you can see from the beginning photos, my work has greatly improved. I tend to use models that are maybe about my own age or older, because one of the biggest things to me is why we have these bridal magazines, and I don't understand why the mother of the brides modeling these mother of the bride outfits are my age, because, you know, that's not your mother of the bride clientele. Your mother of the bride clientele is a lady in her 40s or 50s or 60s who is maybe, you know, who isn't a skinny size 6, you know, they're real women. And I'm trying to kind of do that in my work. You know, the model before, she's 39, and this is actually my hairdresser, but she's absolutely stunning. But these women, these are my clientele. You know, my clientele aren't, aren't these skinny models. They're real women, and they're mothers, and, you know, they've had children, and they're older. And I think that's what I want my work to represent. I want my work to represent the, you know, the average lady. And so I've been working with quite a few photographers before lockdown, and due to COVID, there hasn't been any weddings really, and there hasn't been any race days, and my business has kind of taken a little bit of a quiet spell. But I've been looking at working with stylists and photographers to get experience in working in fashion editorials. So I've been making hats for people who want that kind of practice at taking photos. And it also gives me more the creativeness that I'm kind of losing now from not having anything to work towards. So I get stylists or photographers will send me a mood board and I'll make a headpiece for that mood. I've been having quite a lot of fun doing that. So recently, before COVID, my headpieces started to get picked up by magazines. And that is just something I only dreamed of. You know, I thought that would be something that would happen maybe after 10 years of being in the business, but for it to only happen after a few months was just absolutely amazing. And it's always a nice surprise, you know, when you get sent a link of somebody's seen your hat in a magazine and you think, oh my gosh, that they've taken it from my website and they've put it in a magazine. It's great. It's such an amazing achievement. At the beginning of 2020, there was a big hype about how wedding millinery would be fashionable. So I made a big collection in February for this kind of burst that there was going to be this fashion trend. And of course, COVID happened. So there's not even been any weddings to kind of form a new fashion trend at the moment. But it was still nice to get these pieces featured in magazines. So I also sell my hats internationally, and this is an Australian client who ordered a headpiece for the Gold Cup in Australia, which is a big, massive event over there. And she won Best Hat of the Evening wearing her headpiece. And again, you know, when you look at all these women who are in these competitions and they're winning these things, they just look so happy. And I just look at that smile and it's so heartwarming to know that that's me that's put that smile on that face, that's, you know, made this happen. I recently, as Lisa mentioned, have won several awards. And one of my proudest moments is being able to take my mum on that journey with me. And for her, you know, we got to attend some swanky events. Remember swanky events before COVID? And winning the #1 Scotland Amazing Women Award for Best Business Innovator, that kind of stopped the imposter syndrome, as I would call it. And winning that, I remember coming down from the stage and thinking, I'm a businesswoman now. That's me. I'm a businesswoman. I've got the trophy. That proves that I can run a business and I can, you know, I can get out of my nursery head mind frame. But of course, when I went to fill my first tax return, I definitely didn't feel like I was a businesswoman trying to figure that out. And that's my presentation over. So yeah, as I said, I love the creative process, and with COVID it has been hard because inspiration has been really difficult to find sometimes, and it's, you know, when you're only walking about your house every day and or walking out in your own neighborhood, it is hard. But luckily with me doing the style shoots for fashion editorials and kind of volunteering my work, that's getting the creativeness up, and hopefully I'll have more work to share soon. But thank you. I'll hand you back over to Lisa.
The light appears eventually. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was amazing. I mean, that's not just hats, that's works of art. I'm sure we'll be. I'm looking forward to catching up with Rachel at the end, and it's my pleasure to introduce our fourth speaker. I'd like to welcome Emma Lynn Hartley on camera.
Hi.
Hello there, hello. Emma Lynn Hartley is a theatre maker, director and performer from Dunfermline who's worked internationally and across the UK. She's an attached artist with the Lyceum Theatre Early 20 programme and is currently making work with their company Siren. And with On Night's Theatre, Jenny Lee, Tomorrow's a New Day, which has a discussion and a performance next week with OnFife. So we're looking forward to seeing that. Emma is one to watch. I'll leave you with Emma Lynn Hartley.
Thanks. I'll just share my screen just now as well. Okay. So my name's Emma. I'm a theatre maker and grew up in Dunfermline. So my background is in, it's quite rooted in my identity. I do a lot of autobiographical work and issues that I feel quite passionate about, and I try and work those into my theatre. So I am working class and I am queer, and a lot of my theatre reflects issues that affect working class queer people, a lot of the underdog, and about issues surrounding that. So I've always been interested in theatre. I'm sure some of you will be familiar with the Singing Kettle. That was my first ever time on a stage. And I decided to go into study drama and performance at Queen Margaret University. And it was a very broad education. It was theoretical but highly practical. So it was kind of an all-rounder experience, and that kind of is reflected on my work as I go through life. I direct, I perform, write, basically in, like, the way that I describe it is anywhere that pays me. And then I became the first Scottish student to study at the Eugene O'Neill Theatre Institute in the United States as well. So I studied there at the end of 2016 after I graduated, supported by scholarships and funds. And again, very broad education there. I'm not a fan of boxing myself in. I've always been interested in doing lots, and it's the way that I say to people about, like, when they ask what I do, when I say theatre maker and they ask to narrow that down a little bit, it's about the work for me rather than what I do with the work. I'm very passionate about theatre, and I've specialised in dark comedy as well. I wrote a dissertation on the power of dark comedy and what it can do to talk about taboo issues and how important it is to make tough to talk about topics accessible. So some of my early work was just, as you do, it's the whole stereotype of you get paid in exposure, and I did for a while, and like a box office split of sales. So this photograph here is from when I was in Lieutenant of Inishmore, which was my first semi-professional job back in 2014. And it's a play by Martin McDonagh, who is a big dark comedy fan. And kind of throughout university as well, I would do sketch comedy. So that has fed into a lot of my, the way that I make work just now as well. So I started my own theatre company halfway through university as well. I directed something for the first time, and it really, really drew me in. I have painted a lot as well as a hobby, not as a career. So the way that I kind of relate to directing is a bit like painting. It's a bit like a composition, but real time and with people. So in order to get more directing experience, I started this company and directed a number of productions. So Daniel Sinclair and Irrelevant and Fuck Boys for Freedom were all ones that I directed, and Capital Converse was something that I produced. And they all kind of went down this route of using dark comedy to explore larger issues. So Daniel Sinclair talked a lot about mental health and stigma associated with immigration. Irrelevant was about apathy experienced by young people and kind of the need to politically be active without the agency to do so. And Fuck Boys for Freedom, which I love the name, highlight of my show repertoire. But that was a kind of sketch comedy and theatre fusion. And that was really to try and draw in a crowd of people who needed to talk about the issues. So a lot of people I found who want to discuss feminism or toxic masculinity and work, they do it with a very serious approach. So what I wanted to do was create something that would actually attract the people who need to hear the message behind the show, and avoid preaching to the choir, which I think is a really high risk when you create work about difficult issues. So going on from there, I made Sex, Drugs and a Cup of Tea. This was the last theatre production that I did with that company. And it's something that I wrote myself as well. I started writing it when I was in America and developed it more and did it at a few festivals, including Outwith Festival, which was semi-autobiographical based on my experiences of domestic abuse. And it was partnershiped with an LGBT plus anti-violence charity as well. So I always try and bring in charities associated with the issues that I talk about as well in my work. And here we have me doing what I do to earn money before the pandemic. So kind of producing a lot of this work, low paid and part-time. I tried to get involved in other jobs that would pay me and develop my skills and experiences whilst being able to support myself. So I have worked so far front of house and bar in 5 theatres so far across Edinburgh and Glasgow. I worked in the Edinburgh Dungeons for a while as a scare actor. If you've ever been round there, there's a high chance that I was in the cannibal cave screaming at you, and a tour guide as well. So variety of things. And cabaret as well. I worked in Bohemia, singing and dancing on the tables. So it's a far cry from the Edinburgh Dungeons, and that really focuses on like immersive work and cabaret. So a lot of it was to do with a kind of crowd draw and getting everyone really excited and having a good night. But also we had control over the numbers that we would put on. We also had kind of political spins. So although a lot of it was like the whole concept was to look fabulous and take photos with people and just get everyone to have a good night out, basically. We had a night for the races, so we made points about like animal rights there and about global warming and stuff like that. So it's really fun what you can do with cabaret and putting a little cheeky spin on something to make people think when they're also enjoying themselves at the same time. And then I went into something completely different, did a bit of stage management. Again, I like to have my fingers in lots of pies. So I worked for Bard and the Botanics for a couple of years, pre-pandemic, hopefully once again when everything is allowed to happen and outdoor theatre can happen again. So you can see the set here for Antony and Cleopatra. And I've stage managed for a number of other productions still in the works and technical skills, which I started developing back when I started my own company, because I was kind of a one-woman producing bands, operating the desk and sound editing and doing lots of different things. And then I went back into acting again. So at Leith Theatre, we produced The Last Days of Mankind, which had an international cast of 30 actors from France, Germany, Serbia, Ukraine, Poland, Ireland, and the Tiger Lilies from England as well. So that was a real mishmash of different collaborative theatrical styles coming together to make one epic production. So for anyone who's not familiar with the play, it is, and I'm not saying this to be hyperbolic, it's the longest play ever written. It's about that thick and it'll last 9 hours long if you do it front to back and cover to cover. So the version that we produced was, I think, 4.5 hours at the Leith Theatre, and it's written by Karl Kraus, who was a journalist during the First World War. So it was an anti-war satirical play. And again, you can see added in a bit more cabaret to that as well. So I was singing with the Tiger Lilies and using my skills that way. And we also took it to Germany, which we performed with a house band. So we added in new music, which I helped collaborate on and sang with them as well. The whole 30 people on a stage, multi-European, it just seems such a far cry from where we're at now, but it was such a great learning experience, such a great life experience. Which brings me back to Dunfermline as well. I've done a few things with OnFife, but probably my favourite was working with writer Diane Stewart from Dunfermline, on Reminiscences of Dunfermline, which was a book by Alexander Stewart of the same name. And that was taking multiple different stories. It had lists of towns that don't really exist anymore. It's from the 1800s, and letters and stories. So we weren't even sure if some of these lists or stories were even true, but it was about trying to make those multiple stories come to life on a stage. So it was very kind of simple but effective directing techniques. Like we can see there's pages of a script that have been made into a shark fin about a man who apparently was confronted by a shark in the River Forth. And so that was so much fun to do. We did that in the Carnegie Hall. And kind of coming back to my performing cabaret thing, I've done this kind of chronologically because it seemed to make the most sense to me at the time. So I kind of jumped back and forth because that's what I just do in my daily life anyway. But Walking on Eggshells was a piece of cabaret theatre that I've been developing. It's the last thing that I performed before COVID-19 and lockdown hit. I think almost a year ago today. A year and a couple of days, I think it'll be, since I last performed this. So it's still in development, about abuse as well, and how there's this stereotype of a crazy chick, and playing off of that, of this kind of chick who's broken free from her eggshell and is singing all of these songs that are in pop culture that glorify this crazy chick mentality. And then COVID-19 hit. There we have me in a dress made of toilet paper, because what else do you do when a pandemic hits and you're wanting to make a little piece of satirical parody online video, which you can still see. So I made a couple of kind of parody songs along that line. I've recently made an autobiographic film for OnFife, which I think only got released yesterday. So if you want to check that out, then you can on their social media. And I've also had time to get a couple of qualifications. And I've really been focusing on my mental health as well, because I realized that I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to be kind of constantly producing, which I think a lot of artists and people can relate to. And kind of coming back to working, it's quite a big shift. So I'm really wanting to, going forward, work in my mental health self-care practices for that. Jenny Lee, Tomorrow's a New Day, is something that I've been ongoing work with for the past couple of years. And again, we've got a directed reading presentation. So it's been a kind of shift from working in person to online. So it'll be a Zoom directing, but mostly focusing on the development of a script and really telling the history of this fantastic woman, which I am shocked to say that I didn't know about her until I saw the kind of job for a director advertised for it. But she is incredible, and I really hope to do this story justice in the way that it develops. And Siren Theatre Company is something that has been ongoing. So this is my new theatre company. And rather than just myself running it, it is with 3 fantastically talented women from varying disciplines. So we have Imogen Sterling, who is a fantastic spoken word poet, Lucy Harrower, who is an actor-musician, and Lauren Mitchell, who is an actor-musician and director as well. And we all write too. So we've been developing a show called Text Me When You Get Home, which is about the hypervigilance that women feel they need to have when they're walking home at night. So it is a gig theatre piece. So again, kind of forming from my passion about mixing genres together, as I have done with kind of sketch and theatre before, and cabaret and theatre. This one uses like live music and gig theatre to really tell the story and go into the things that we're told to do when we're walking home, and the things that we're expected to do, like walking home with keys between our knuckles, and what it means like to be perceived as a woman as well. We've recently been accepted into the New Scottish Companies programme with the Gaiety Theatre in Ayr as well, which is really fantastic. And also I've been working with the Lyceum lately as well. I'm an associated artist for their Emerging Theatre Makers programme. And recently I've been assistant directing their Lyceum soundstage production of Angela, which again, it's a completely new thing for me working in audio theatre. It was a bit of a starstruck moment for me working with this cast. If you can see, it's working with Toby Jones and Pam Ferris. So it's like, how am I on a Zoom call with these people? This is insane. So it's been really, really great to get to work in new mediums and get to put the sound design practice that I've been doing since way back when I had my first company and I had to do all that for myself. It's really come back and helped me. So this is why I've kind of done it chronologically. It all fits in together at the end. So in the future, I am hoping to develop my work as a director with new writing. I'm hoping to work on a verbatim theatre project with Diane. This is a photo of us together working on Reminiscences of Dunfermline, called Bisexuality, about raising the profile of bisexual identities as well and focusing on positive mental health. So that is my presentation. If you want to check me out on any of my social media, feel free to. And thank you for listening. I realise I've gone over a bit. I apologise there.
Not at all, not at all. We were riveted. That was absolutely amazing, Emmeline. Absolutely amazing. Can't you see this girl accepting an award someday? You really can. Can I please invite Rachel, Elie, and Rachel Louise to please come back on camera and join us. Hello.
Hi.
Now, the chat box has been going mad this evening, which is amazing. So I've got some questions for you. But before I do anything, can we just do a collective? Because that was absolutely amazing. I'm so privileged to watch you share your work this evening. I really am. Now, we've had some questions, so we better get to them. Rachel Lee, CG Queenan is asking, is it hard to be free thinking when you're producing work for a living?
That's really,
yeah, and is it how do you combine creativity and practicality? Do you have an approach to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question actually, because I did mention in my presentation that a lot of my work isn't planned, and to be honest, it isn't. The sketchbooks that I make are very rarely looked at, but when I do need a kick up the bum or some inspiration or whatnot, I always go back and look through my old work just to remind myself that I'm capable of doing it. And if I'm in a place when I'm quite stressed about it, or if I'm feeling quite worried about making a piece, then it doesn't work. So I end up maybe doing it for 10 minutes and then going back to it a day later, getting myself, just doing a bit of self-care, having a bath, going for a walk, and then coming back to it when I feel a bit more calm, and then I just end up seeing where it takes me. But it can be difficult, and I'm quite lucky that I do work in community engagement as well. So the time that I spend at work, I come home and I'm in a place where I want to make it, you know. But yeah, it can be difficult. But I think getting yourself to quite a relaxed place helps, and it helps that creativity flow.
And I think one topic that you all have mentioned this evening is self-care and taking care of your mental health while being a creative in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
That's one question that we've had from Karen Taylor. Thank you, Karen. Karen is asking, what has kept you all going over the last year? There's collective smiles there. I can see everybody smiling.
Well, I think creativity has really been important, but it's not being creative at the expense of your whole life. And yeah, just a little bit about the previous question as well, is having what you're doing creatively as your source of income and your source of living, it is actually quite freeing as well, to be able to not have to do that on top of surviving. So it's a lot of give and take, I think. And it's just trying to integrate self-care and well-being rather than seeing that as something separate.
Elie, Rachel, you got a...
Yeah, what's kept me going really is kind of connection with different communities online, like both in Fife, across the country and internationally. Like suddenly there was all these opportunities to just, as long as you could make the time zones work, go to a burlesque festival in the US. Could never have done that pre-COVID. I did it, like I did 2 last year, and yeah, just being able to connect globally with different creatives and different people at all sorts of different stages in their career has been amazing.
Rachel Nixon?
So for me, I guess the first 6 months were tough because there was nothing happening, and then and we were still all in that frame of mind that the world was going to open up again. But I think when people started to realise that actually, do you know what, COVID's here to stay, a lot of milliners started doing online Zoom classes. And before, for me to have attended one of these classes, especially down in England, you're talking about £300, £400 to go down, get a hotel and things. Then all of a sudden, for £45, I could do that exact same class because of Zoom and because you're able to get so many people on Zoom. So that's kind of been great. I've learned so many skills. I've studied with milliners in France, Australia, and England. And again, these are opportunities that wouldn't have been open to me if it had not been from COVID. So that's definitely kept me going. But I'm not going to lie, there's been periods and weeks where I've just done nothing because there's just not been anything to create for. But now that we've now got the news that the world may be opening up again, there's a lot of things going on in the background. So
Exciting times.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel Lee, would you like to?
Yeah, no, I agree. The Zoom classes and whatnot have helped, and I've been lucky enough to be part of a mindfulness drawing class as well quite a few times, which has been really good, where I talk about automatic drawing and just trying to get to that place where you do feel a bit calmer, that you can trust your brain to do it. But also just having the sort of slowed down lifestyle helps me to create work. So I've really enjoyed just using that time when I can to make bits and pieces. And try different bits and pieces that I would never have tried because I'm at home, using different materials. I just use anything that I can find, really. So using the stuff that I've already got and just piecing bits together and whatnot, it's been interesting. I think I needed that in a way.
Thank you so much for all for your contributions this evening. Thank you to Emily Harley, to Rachel Nixon, Elie Ellery and Rachel Louise Lee for sharing their work this evening. Now, please, in the spirit of International Women's Day, please check out their socials, their website, their work, follow them, subscribe to their websites, support them. OnFife has a series of events that are coming up, so please do have a look on the website. Please also check the Create in Fife Instagram account, which Rachel Nixon has been looking after over the last week. And thank you so much for coming along this evening. It's been an absolute joy and a delight. I'm going to hand you back over to Heather Stewart, who's going to say goodbye to us this evening.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, I think you've done a great job of all of the thank yous. Thanks again from all of us who are on the webinar and from my team at OnFife to the panelists. To say that everybody was amazing and inspiring tonight just sounds a bit like hyperbole again, but do you know what? I just thought everybody was stunning. I just thought how it's going to be so hard to top this, and then they were all so good in so many different ways, so stunning. So thanks again to the panelists. Thanks to the OnFife team who are behind the scenes but making it all work, particularly Rosie and Gillian. And of course, thanks to you, Lisa May Young, for being our amazing host for this evening. Absolutely superb. I hope everybody's enjoyed the evening as much as I have. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy what's left of International Women's Day 2021, and thanks for joining us for this event. Good night.
We are the faces of the present. Different phases like the full moon, like Luna's crescent. That divine link to the earth and the heavens. We are the descendants of the women that came before us, of generations that are yet to be born. The birth before the storm, before the wild wind breathes into a life that believes in her warrior soul. We are leaders, leaders of love and compassion, of freedom and self-expression. We are the women that stand firmly against oppression, seeking justice and equality in all that we do, raising our voices so that all women's voices are heard too, shattering that silence, that deathly silence. With every breath that we breathe and every echo we scream, we will not allow women to suffer at the hands of violence, at the hands of any abuse, or to be used and seen as the weaker sex. We are not objects, we are life. We hold the divine universal power. We are waves, waves that ripple in every ocean. And every ripple that rings expands into the sea, creating this universal energy that's beyond any human being. It's a sisterhood, it's a connection that can only ever be understood by she, by her, by me, by understanding that once one woman stands her ground, raising the volume and speaking loud, her voice travels through the whispers of the fine-bladed grass, through the thick fog that sweeps across mountain tops and crashes against the raging sea. Her voice is the very heartbeat that bonds hearts of unity. We are the faces of the women that stand proudly together, to be the change we want to see, for every woman to be heard. So I choose to challenge you to share your poem, write your piece of spoken word, raise your voice as I've done mine, so no woman's voice goes ever unheard.